All right. Hello, comrades. Jason here with Comrade Steve and Comrade Bronco in the house with us tonight, talking about unions. We had some technical difficulties getting going, but I appreciate it for those of you that might be hanging out or sticking through it. Um, But yeah, we made it through it. We got through our little audio problems last week. We had more audio problems this week. We were literally trying to iron out audio issues for some time. But I've been excited for this episode mainly because we're talking about labor movements and unions and the role they play in uh, in not only revolution, but helping people gain an understanding of class conscious, as it directly establishes a working class uh, identity within our society. And I think that's really important from a Marxist-Leninist perspective, and also from a working class perspective. And so I have Stephen on from last week. I just welcome back, Stephen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Hey, no problem, man. And we have Comrade Bronco back with us. Uh, Definitely, it's good to have you. I thought about
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, man, definitely. I there's been a whole lot of a talk and a lot of questions as to how do we as Marxist Leninists, how do we help other working class uh, other working class people gain somewhat of a class consciousness? Well, we do that in helping people well at work, especially because we understand that any revolutionary movement is going to have a labor movement at its backbone, right? I mean, that's what's going to propel. Uh,
Yeah, that's the whole thing there. I think that, class conscious starts at the workplace, begins.
right,
And, I think unions, especially through the Industrial Revolution era, and obviously in different countries, they happened in different time frames. For example, it started in Britain between 1760 and 1820, and it didn't hit the States until 1820 to 1870. And through that time frame, what you had was a lot of machinery uh, getting put into the workplace and displacing workers. And I think that made a lot of contempt, and that's why workers started banding together, counteract that. So
right. No, that's a really great point, and that's why I was so looking forward to having you on, man, because you do have somewhat of a good idea of the history and firsthand what it means uh, to be a union worker and what it means to not be a union worker. And from a Marxist Leninist perspective, I mean, essentially, all that a union is doing is essentially what a union does is barter for the means of production.
it does. It does that through something we like to call collective bargaining, and basically what that is when workers come together to form a union, it allows them to negotiate a fair contract, and that's precisely the main point of the union. Besides, having representation and for different disputes and whatnot.
Right, right. And that's clearly what it is. And I mean, not a, like I don't claim to be an expert or anything like that, but and a lot of people might not either. But can you tell us maybe um, what some differences are, or is from you being a Marxist yourself, can you tell us what some of the differences are between certain unions, or what
Yes,
like some of the
absolutely.
ideologies are? I mean, that's some of the questions that I know a lot of us have, and I was hoping maybe you could help me with that.
Well, basically, I think there's three different types of unionism. You have trade unionism, which kind of protects the trade that the workers in, and those tend to be a little bit narrow-minded, and can be a little self-seeking. You have what's called industrial unionism, uh, where you organize industry-wide. And now I'm in a trade union as a bricklayer, but I work in a steel mill that's organized in an industrial union. And I've actually seen a difference between, when I laid brick outside and, my union uh, gave us certain rights and protections uh, compared to where I'm at now, even though I'm still a trade union member. We have that kind of umbrella of the industrial union, which gives us even a little bit more, uh, rights and leniencies and whatnot. And the
Right.
third type, revolutionary unionism. Now, this is a practice that's been put on the back burner. I would say you really saw it back in 1946 when conservative members uh, passed the Taft-Hartley Act. And what that did
Oh, wow.
was it banned union contributions to political candidates, and it restricted strikes uh, under the guise of national security, because during that time, uh, it was a war era, and they
Right.
didn't want people going on strike when they're trying to build tanks and bombs and shit.
Right.
And
I get you.
but that we know that's all bullshit. But the big thing is that they forced expulsion of communists out of the union. Now that since has been repealed, but unfortunately, communists died out once that happened.
Right.
The
And you
main
say that was around what time?
That
Just
was in 1946.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, because that
Rights again.
that brings up a pretty an interesting point, and another thing is because I mean I think about it every day when I go to work. A coworker I work with, I mean I don't work in a union, but I work in a workplace that is trying to be um, one of the better places to work, under quote unquote, under their own words, in the industry that I am. And I'm a carpenter. I work in a millwork shop, and for a company that essentially we build houses, and that's all done um, between our different production facility and the millwork shop where I work at. And the problems, rear themselves in many cases. But there's there's people that I've worked with there, that, and I've mentioned, I mean, being a Marxist, I've mentioned unions at work before, and I'm trying to form one. But the feedback I get is, oh, I date, one coworker I work with. She's like, yeah, yeah, I dated a union worker, and he raved about it, and he couldn't tell me enough about how much he loved about it, and I get that a lot. And the one guy that I actually work with in my department is pretty, he has high standards, for his employer to meet, for him to do his job. Like he has to have everything in his place. Like, he came to work and, people had, been there and taken his tools and put a bunch of his stuff all out of it. He just left. He's like, I can't do my job like that. If he has essentially has at least from my initial point of view, he has a pretty high standard of his work, of he appreciates his work. He goes to work. I mean, he's used to working in a union, but he obviously works with me now. He isn't, but that's somewhat, he's used to that environment. And I've noticed it from like the outside looking in that's sort of created like conflicts within our work because we obviously we don't work in a union.
Right.
So
Well, I think the capitalist really wants to. They want to streamline it so that you do more with less, and when that happens, it tends to add more burden onto the worker. And that's one thing unions are good about is you work under a contract, so the people you work for have to follow certain guidelines,
right.
and he's used to that, and that's a very good thing. I wish
Right.
more
And,
workers.
can you break down for us, comrade, your basic differences, and like basically how you got to know, like your own personal history, like how you got to know what a union is, and what a union does in contrast to like what a normal job in that field would do.
Okay.
You just, I mean, because there's a lot of people that just don't really maybe even know what a union is, or like why do I even care what a union is, right? So,
right. Well, the ultimate structure of the union is the workers organizing under one banner, and a fair contract in their eyes for their terms of employment. When I started in my trade, I was non-union. Everything was 100% all about production, all about cutting corners, all about just
right.
making money.
Standard.
And what the biggest thing, I started questioning if continuing what I was doing was the right way or not. And circumstances as they had it with the economy and everything, it put me in a big bind. Back in 2008, we had a housing
right.
crisis, and I had just bought a house, and I was working really good, and I just got married, and then all of a sudden, and it was just like a house of cards falling down. Rate mortgage, so my house payment doubled. Construction flatline, so I was without a job, and born and not having a job with insurance. He was born emergency C-section, and that cost me, about $90,000 just for that.
Oh my
and
God.
all that piled up at once, being unemployed and not being able to afford my house and taking care of my family. And my father-in-law was a steel worker
Right.
here in town. And, he would constantly tell me, man, you need to, join the union and get some benefits. And, I had always heard that they made, some more money and had benefits. And it's early on in my career that I considered, but at that time, it was like you had to know somebody. You know what I mean?
Right.
They weren't really on top of their organizing game.
It's like merit. Yeah, you got to know somebody to get in there to kind of, right. I understand that aspect of it.
Now, since then, they've kind of went back on that, and it's not really like that anymore. At least in my union, in my area.
Well, that's good.
The thing is, I saw all these benefits of joining, and I was without a work. And the only jobs that were going on construction wise were public funded jobs, schools and colleges and hospitals and different things like that. And biggest density is in the union market because it's public money, and a lot of the democratic leaders of the past eras, made it so that if you were using taxpayer money, you had to follow certain standards and pay the workers right and everything.
Right.
And so, there was a high density of union jobs, and I was able to get guys, and I was out of work, and I was able to get in. And upon getting in, I noticed right away that I was making a lot more money. I mean, and the
For pretty
statistic,
much the same work. You were making more money for the same work. Like I'm
I
trying to
was
like,
absolutely.
so
And
like,
it wasn't even that I was, producing less or anything. I was just getting more of my surplus value because the profit margins that non-union and union contractors make are comparable. They're going to charge, and I'm just going to throw some numbers out there, but say they charge $60 an hour per man. It's doing it.
right,
And fluctuating a couple dollars to be competitive because it's a competitive market. And what happened is when I was non-union, I was out of that $60, I was making $20 an hour. Well,
right,
upon joining the union, I was making 42 out of that $60 an hour. So that's a big,
right,
that's more than double. And that was just my experience, but they say on average that uh, unions have union members earn 10 to 30% higher pay. And not only that, but they have the benefits, and because you're working for legitimate people that are paying their workers comp and unemployment insurance and all that, then you have those benefits as well.
right. I mean, and that kind of holds true to, I mean, you're talking about it, and I mean, it just, man, it sounds awesome. You know what I mean? But
Well, it is. I mean, the thing is, we work hard as the working class. We create everything. We
right,
keep the power on in your house. We dig the ditches. We stock your shelves. We create all wealth. The
right,
fact that some capitalist prick thinks that he's going to piggyback off your labor, and and make dollar for dollar, or you know you're creating, that's bullshit.
yeah, no, I agree 100%. Um, but that also, you're talking about it, and that brings about another question that I've had on my mind. And I mean, and you kind of identified it earlier, and that's revolutionary unions or Marxist unions.
Yes.
And I was looking over some things to prepare for this podcast, and I came across a piece by Alexis Lazovsky, and it's entitled "The Role of the Labor Unions in the Russian Revolution." And I highly recommend it to everybody here, not only for history, but for contextual and substantive reasons as well. I mean, it's really a really great piece. He was the I want to say executive minister of labor, or he was, but it's an extraordinary piece.
Well, I think there, as far as the unionist movement in Russia, there there was a lot of good involved in that and a lot of bad. I can't say
Right.
that it was the unions themselves that were revolutionary in Russia. I
Right.
think obviously it was the party that
Right.
was revolutionary.
Sure, and that
And
holds true. That holds true to a certain point. I'm going to read an excerpt from that, the unions under Tsarism, and I'll just start off. In Russia, as in every other country, the labor movement commenced with the development of capitalism. The first strikes in Russia broke out between 1870 and 1880. But up to the revolution in 1905, there were no labor unions in Russia. There were societies of mutual aid, but not very numerous, and their activities were so much limited by police laws that they had no influence whatsoever on the labor conditions or the toiler's life. There was an economic struggle. However, there were no unions. During the periods of conflict, a strike committee was organized, at the head of which usually was a secret social democratic organization of the locality. The strikes generally ended with deportations to Siberia, and as we know, Stalin was deported to Siberia by the Tsar for organizing a workers' strike in that time. But only in 1905 were unions organized. Rapidly, they embraced the large laboring masses. In 1906 and in 1907, in Russia, there were 200,000 organized workers. But the defeat of the revolution was the defeat of the labor movement. And by that, we're referencing the 1905 bourgeois revolution, bourgeois democratic revolution. From 1907 until 1914, the unions led a miserable existence as a consequence of the incredible police persecutions. The councils and committees were under constant menace of arrest. The police carried away treasures and books. The chairmen and secretaries of unions were deported to Siberia. Thus, Tsarism made impossible all organized economic struggle. Okay, the declaration of war, the same war that was waged for justice, civilization, and culture, was the signal for the complete destruction of labor unions. A proof of this repression exercised by Tsarism can be found in the fact on the eve of the revolution in 1917, in Russia, there were only 3 unions, with a total membership of 1,500 people. But in spite of this rudimentary state of the labor movement, the toiling masses led tenaciously the economic struggle. And in this struggle, under the yoke of Tsarism was forged the class consciousness, the Nat hatred against oppressors, which broke with elemental force in 1917. The overthrow.
I think that makes a lot of good points there. What essentially we're seeing is that unionism elevates class conscious, as we see with Stalin, who was, a labor organizer and organized a lot of different strikes and stuff. Being in those circles kind of let him draw the parallels between, the Tsarism, the exploitation that was inherent in it, and the path forward to emancipation. I think you find that with all labor leaders, and not even, well, say that today. Our labor leaders today are shit, bourgeois. They, basically sell out to liberalism and live off fat salaries and forget what it's like to be in the trenches. But back then, a lot of, virtually all our unions were created by communists and socialists. And, it is. And look at our case in America here with Eugene V. Debs. he organized the American Railway Union, lots of wildcat strikes, co-founded the IWW, and even started the Socialist Party of America. Well, a couple parties. Before that,
Right. But
it was the Democratic Socialist Party of America, but then it was the Socialist Party of America.
I mean, I think it's pretty monumental that Eugene Debs actually got, like, what was it, like 3 or 4% of the vote while he was in jail. Like, fuck
Well, the
me.
real funny thing
I mean,
is he
Joe
ran
Biden
10
could have
times.
said that. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, he ran for president 10 times, and every time he ran, he got a higher percentage up to that point where, he ran from jail.
right.
He was, and it was funny because I live in Canton, Ohio, and that's where he gave his famous war speech over World War One, condemning it, and got thrown in jail, and that's when he ran for president.
Right.
Wouldn't you guys say that Eugene Debs is another good example of why a socialist can't take any power, through like elections? That's why we are for revolution.
I think
Wow.
that's a very good example.
That's a really
and
good
that's a
question.
good question.
That's a really good question.
It definitely points out the fact that, without a workers' party that takes political control and political power, that, even though unions have a potential to be a vanguard, without a party capable of organizing the economy and everything, it's futile.
Yeah.
And you
You're
do see
exactly
that
right.
that's why, USSR turned into an industrial powerhouse while America was on red lines.
Exactly. And on a smaller
Yeah.
scale, that's precisely why Manco's anarchists failed. He had a great idea, but he had no idea how to sustain it or do anything else. And it literally failed in the Ukraine. I just had a discussion earlier today with an anarchist, and it made me want to bring that up. And it's just, they, and it's laughable in a lot of ways, but it's sad in a lot of ways too, because people don't.
I mean, ideally, that's it seems great. You know what I mean? When I initially first started, going down the Marxist path and everything, I considered being a unionist and everything. I considered myself a syndicalist, where unions kind of serve as the organs of society and the economy.
Sure.
The more I learned and the more I read up on it, you see a certain pattern where, these movements, they create great support from the masses, but once they're able to take control, it's like they don't know what they're doing. And
Right.
not only that, but when you hold a pure democracy, you get all kinds of bourgeois elements that kind of, they're reactionary to the working class program. And,
Right.
that's where the USSR, in forming, a legit party and taking control and, making the workers a part of that control and, centralizing everything so that it was under an ideology that, was able to, have the mechanisms to cope with the pushback from the bourgeois.
Right.
And, that's something that we don't have today. I mean, today, unions are very political. I mean, that's one of the things about it is, they make the connection that workers need to be political. That's where it drops off, and then they leave it up to the politicians to do everything for us. And 99.99% of the politicians are all capitalists. They have nonprofits, and they have businesses, and they have money here and they have money there, and they're not out for the interest of the worker, no matter how much they like to pretend. I was at a AFL-CIO function, and there was a guy running for a Democratic Senate seat in our state who was a guest speaker, and he liked to talk about his dad was a union man and how he supports labor and this and that. And he's telling us this up there on his soapbox in a $900 fucking Armani suit. And
but really though, like, what if there was like a guy, like, what if there was a guy like Lenin that spoke to you all? Like, would that, I mean, like, because part of me, like, in a big part of me thinks that American unions, like, maybe a fraction of them are maybe Marxists or communists, right? Like, but the seeds are already there. I mean, the material is already there. I mean, you're a part of a union. You identify with your working class brothers and sisters. So what is the problem? Like I just, like, that's where my disconnect is in some ways, is like trying to be like, like, these motherfuckers, I mean, like, you already get the fact that we are a class, a working class. You know what I mean? And that's what you are as a member of a union. You're, in essence, you establish that. And you establish the fact that you're not going to accept scraps that are being thrown off a plate onto the ground. I mean, that's what you're doing as a union member. You're saying, I'm not going to accept that shit. Okay, right? I mean,
that's true. I mean, that's the mindset. But unfortunately, the reality that we have it with our labor leaders is, they negotiate and take these big austerity concessions to kind of roll back, different benefits and rights. And I mean, we were talking about the Taft-Hartley Act earlier, and I mentioned that did strikes under the guise of national security, but they never really lifted that up and even used it to their advantage. Okay, I was saying that I'm in a trade union and I work in an industrial unionized shop.
Right.
And, say the steel workers go on strike, and, being a union man, I know not to cross a picket.
Right.
Okay. But here's what they, no, never. But what they do is they say, well, it says right here in your national labor agreement that, you have to continue work, that the business has to continue to supply men. So what happens is that you see a lot of trade unionists crossing the line of the industrial union, to go to work. And if they don't, then what happens is the contractor that's organized under the trade union can get sued because he's not following the agreement.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's like a catch-22, like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, really.
Oh, 100%, and I've already, because negotiations for the steel workers are coming up this year, and I've already played this scenario in my head, and their contracts are coming up and they're going to negotiate. And if I hope they go well, and I hope that they reach a fair agreement. But if they don't and they decide to go on strike, that means that I'm going to have to cross the line, which I'm not going to do. Personally,
Right.
What's going to happen is, our company is going to say one of two things. They're either going to say, okay, guys, you can honor the picket and not go to work, and we're going to find some other guys that are willing to do it and go in there and work till it's over, and we'll give you their jobs back. or your jobs back. And that's the first scenario. The second scenario is they say, okay, we're going to, find somebody willing to do it. You know what I mean? And I'm
Right.
out of a job. And, I think strikes are important, and that's a risk personally that I'm willing to take. Even though my job is my, I mean, my wife's a stay-at-home mom, and because I have this job, she's able to do that. So it could be detrimental to my own
Right.
personal
Sure.
being.
But I mean,
it's,
you have a little more security to be able to stand up for yourself and for your family and for your rights and for your working class brethren than if you weren't in a union. I mean, you have
absolutely.
you have something to stand on. I mean, that's
Oh,
important. I mean, and like that's something that I mean, me doing what I do, man, like that's something I dream about, because I mean, there's an example where I brought up forming a union randomly and like probably just off the cuff, and I probably shouldn't have, but we were denied, me and the rest of my shop, we were denied bonuses because someone across the street in production, they got injured on the job. And so because someone over there got injured on the job, we didn't get our bonuses. And you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of shit that
right.
like is
That's
infuriating.
because
And
you don't
like,
have a work under a contract, so you can't. There's nothing you can do about it besides take it if you want to
right,
work. So they kind of got you by the balls. They like to say that we extort them, through striking and different things, but that's not the case. We're extorted. We're extorted on a daily basis, and it's this whole. I can't say where it started for sure. With the libertarian things, I'm pretty sure it was the Koch brothers' father. Um, that got into the John Birch Society and
right,
started up, different, and the thing is that's all individualistic values that doesn't benefit society.
right,
They benefit the powerful, the already powerful. And, a lot of workers kind of get romanced into thinking, in their way. And it's really important as workers that we say, no, if it ain't good for both of us, it's not good for none of us.
right. Yeah, that's important, I think. Stephen, what do you think, man? You've been awful quiet back there. What do you think, man? You got any questions for us?
Oh, oh no, man. I've just been listening a lot because I'm not that informative on unions myself. And
Myself,
Steve,
I'm not either, man. That's
oh,
why I've been listening to
yeah,
Comrade. I've been listening to Bronco go at it, man. So that's what's up.
yeah. Yeah, and Bronco's trying to help me out right now to get into a union, and that's why I've
And
just been very,
yeah,
Oh,
and,
very
absolutely.
interested.
and
We got. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was no. You go ahead. I was just gonna read.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that unions are still very much relevant today, even though they're liberalized, and I think that it's up to the rank and file to really, infiltrate and kind of take over and create our own self-determination and organize from within. And
Right. That seems like its own internal battle. It seems like, because it seems like, as you mentioned before, that unions are so politically affiliated that you got to dominate it somehow. I mean, and it's like it's almost like its own bourgeois democracy in a certain way. You know what
well,
I mean?
I wouldn't even. I mean, you can look at it that way, and on the flip side, you can look at it like they're almost set up to where it's a centralized democracy. to where, you know, we can make our grievances and get our little feet in the doors here and there and our feet under the table. But ultimately it's up, you know, to the leaders. And unfortunately, our leaders have just kind of lost touch with what we put up with on a day-to-day basis. I think unions really need, and I'm not saying that there aren't certain unions, and you won't see it on an international level
Right.
union, but local unions, and that's where the power is, and where there still lives a democracy is in the local unions. But you see the local unions really joining the side, you know, mobilization and, you know, coalitions that benefit the working class. You know, you see the fight for 15, you see the universal health care. I mean, those are all issues that really need to be the forefront and the center of our movement is broad working class, um, you know,
Right.
goals.
Like, but I guess, like, I mean, my whole thing is our ultimate goal is, as Marxist Leninists, is ultimately
Revolution.
making is not only revolution, but the ultimate goal of unionizing the entire state, and that we are all union
Yes.
workers. We are all appreciated. We're all looked after. We all have that. And I mean, that's basically, I mean, what I'm trying to speak to, um, in a certain aspect, is that you're a union worker, and you know that's essentially what the Soviet Union was. It's a union of workers, a union of Soviets, where everybody is looked after and everybody is taken care of, and all the workers have everything that they need at all times, regardless of the conditions. And that's something that they had, and it's something that they had for some time. And that's, you know, what happens when a union takes over a country. Is you have the USSR. I mean, and it happened from a working class revolution with unions at its back. And there were, to give you an idea, the necessity of the October Revolution, the unions, the shop and factory committees understood the provocative tactics of the employers, of the bourgeoisie. In August and Septembers, we sent broadcasts of the motto, "No strikes," for the conflict between the workers and employers could not be solved by any particular union or in a separate industry, but only by the whole, from the viewpoint of production within the limits of the state. The sharp and intermittent economic conflicts of the strike battle, unproductive and without an issue, the offensive tactics in the masters of the feverish banding of the organization of the bourgeoisie, the acts of the generals, and the utilization by the bourgeoisie of the whole state apparatus against the workers, all this brought forward before the unions the problem of power. The theory and practice of the Mensheviks and the social revolutionaries, extolling collaboration with the bourgeoisie, but in reality leaving the workers at the mercy of employers, obtained the majority of the All-Russian Conference of the Unions of June 17, 1917. But they were completely discredited in the month of August 1917. The economic struggles became sharper and sharper. The strike of the leather workers in and around Moscow, numbering around 100,000, striking for 3 months. The great conflicts in the Urals, the mountains in the Donetsk Basin, in Petrograd, in central Russia, etc., taught the great laboring masses to think straight and to think politically. That's what you're talking about, getting the unions to think politically. to get the people in the working class union to think politically. The Russian unions, in accord with the Bolshevist party, raised the battle cry, all power to the Soviets, understanding clearly that all questions concerning the relations between the classes had to be solved on the national arena, i.e., by a new revolution. Thus, even the logic of the economic struggle led by the Russian unions to the October Revolution, the unions found themselves face to face with the problem of power. It arose before them as the problem of saving Russian revolution and its creator, the Russian proletariat. So that's pretty
wouldn't you
powerful.
agree?
I highly recommend you guys check that out. It's Alexis Lazovsky, The Role of the Labor Unions in the Russian Revolution. It's really awesome. I'll read it probably several more times. I really like it. But go ahead, Stephen. I think you were saying something.
Oh, yeah, my bad. I was asking you guys, wouldn't you guys agree that since that one protest happened, Occupy Wall Street, when they made it, that it was the 1% versus the 99%, that right there, is forming a class conscious, because it's taking Oedipal out of the equation and it's putting up front,
Well,
economics, what the problem. I'm not saying that they are a revolutionary people or anything, but
right.
more that it's
Gotta
just
understand that. I mean that's just a literal fact. The 99% and the 1%. However,
right.
the
But
motivations
before they
always going to be Marxist. I mean, they don't.
no,
I mean, they could very well be a pussy hat wearing fucking you're not my president type of person, and
no,
that
for
doesn't
sure.
really mean anything from there. You know what I mean? Like, but I get what you're saying. Totally, I totally do.
I mean, I think that
Like they're yeah. Go on to.
okay. I was gonna say I think those different mobilizations are important, but more so it's important on the tendencies leading these. There was a lot of liberal elements within that Occupy Wall Street movement, even though the original course, was 99% versus the 1%. It kind of strayed off and lost steam after that. And
No, most
even though
definitely.
movements are important, they don't have any type of organization to fall back on. And that's why it's so important
Right.
that we build a party of the people, of ourselves, of educated Marxist Leninists that understand ins and outs of revolution and industrial organization and economic planning.
No, for sure. For sure. Yeah, like I was saying, I wasn't saying like they are a revolutionary people or anything, but more like, instead of putting like Oedipal up front, the people finally
No,
put
it
up
was
front that,
it was definitely a good movement. And I think we need more of them. We need to stir up
yeah,
agitation wherever we can. It's just
for sure.
important that Marxists get in there in the forefront, and we got to have people of the working class that understand work in the trenches, that know that feel the chains of exploitation every day.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
Exactly.
that workers themselves.
Right. And that's kind of what really urged me to put this episode and make this episode this week is because I hear all sorts of things like left unity I hear all kinds of other liberal shit, and it's like, you know what, man? I'm a Marxist-Leninist, and I'm about working class unity. That's what
Yeah,
the fuck.
exactly.
That's what the fuck we're here for. Okay, I'm not a liberal.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not here for left unity. I'm not here for any of
Yes.
that bullshit, man. I'm here for working class unity. I'm here. That's why I'm here. You know, I mean, and I get tired of it, man. And you know, you see it. Yeah, I mean, you guys know it as well as I. You see it all over leftist circles in groups and shit like that. I mean,
Oh, it's everywhere.
not any I control if I got anything to do with it, but you know, I mean, you see it, but you know, and I can't stand it, man. It's like we don't have the time to distract ourselves in these little uh bullshit.
Oedipal
Yeah,
shit.
I mean, I don't have
Yeah.
time. I don't have the time. How do you have the time? That's what I want to know. I want to
I
ask
don't
these
have the
college
time.
kids how they have the time, because you know, I mean, I don't have the time. You know, I'm a Marxist-Leninist, man. I'm, you know, I struggle for the working class and the oppressed
Straight up.
of all nations and of all countries of this planet. And I'm there with them every step of the way. I don't have time to worry about what they do when they go home in their private time. That's not the work of a Marxist-Leninist. That's not what I do. You know what I mean? I'm not, you know, I'm not Ted Cruz fucking following people in the bathrooms, dude. I don't do that shit. You know what I mean? I just don't, you know. So
No, I totally understand that, and I think that's the misinterpretation that many so-called leftists, you know, liberalism is on the left, and it's really not. You know, it's a very uh, right of centrist, you know, philosophy,
right,
and you know, in the same token, though, Jason, and I understand your frustration, but we
sure,
really need to do a better job of educating people and showing the patients, you know, reiterating with historical fact.
right.
And
You've got
you
better
know,
patience than me. I'll agree. I admit it.
yeah, I got some patience, you know, but you know it. And it's on a day-to-day basis, brother. I mean, I can have a bad day and just go off on all types of shit, and I do it occasionally. But
All right.
you know, I'm a human being too.
All
But
right.
I mean, ultimately, we really got to connect with the working class, whether they identify as liberal, conservative, whether they voted for Trump or Hillary or Bernie. We
Yeah, exactly.
we need to reach out to them and really show them that, hey, you know, the only way we're going to achieve power is to take power, and the only way we're going to take power is to build this revolutionary party and to proceed into revolution
I
up
completely
our
agree.
with guns and, you know,
Yeah.
storm our state houses and oust these bourgeoisie politicians and capitalists that are in there, you know, and I really see, you know, as much as I hate and despise Trump, and I really do, but at the same time, fact that he's
He's brought us
bringing
together.
us closer and closer
Yeah.
to a fascist state where you're only going to have two sides to choose from.
Yeah, that's just
Or,
it. And you know, I mean, and that's I've had that discussion, and you kind of, you know, you hit really a big nerve. Um, and that's just it, you know. I mean, you know, let us all speculate for a hot minute if Bernie won. Let's say it's President Bernie right now, and we're still bombing Yemen. We're still giving money to
Hmm.
fucking Saudi Arabia. We're still doing all this other shit, but we wouldn't be fucking, I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't be with Stalin, you know. I wouldn't, you know, I mean, I probably wouldn't have, I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, I'd like to believe it. You know what I mean? I'm a pretty fairly intelligent individual. But would I like to think that I'd be the Marxist-Leninist and the Marxist theorist that I am today if Bernie just won and we had $15 an hour and minimum wage, but we still had
Jason, the thing is even Bernie had some really good lines he was running on. The problem with all those lines is that he would have got elected into office and bring those up, and they would all been sitting ducks and got shot down in Congress and the Senate. And that's why, as Marxist Leninists say, that revolution comes at the end of a gun.
right. It doesn't come from election.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, no
Bernie
reform.
would
I think
not
I've said
have.
that before.
Bernie would not have been able, as much as he would like to have, to follow through on his platform. And
Right.
it's important that that's recognized. And I think
tend to agree. I mean, and even though Bernie Sanders' platform to all of us made sense in a lot of respects, I mean, a lot of the social shit that he wanted to do.
the social shit that they had in the USSR in 1936 that we're just now fighting about. Is that what's
right. That we're now
Yeah.
just like talking about now, like fucking like it's some radical thing. Like, yeah, they fucking had it because of Stalin.
Yes.
Thank Joseph Stalin
And
for universal health care and universal education. That's who did it first. A guy who was a son of a freed serf. He fucking did it. He rose from those depths to radicalizing the working class to being fucking imprisoned and later
he
being.
was the Ragnar fucking Lothbrok of the USSR. That's what
Dude, he was the Billy the fucking Kid of the U.S. Like even like after he was imprisoned in Siberia, dude, it was like the wild dude. Like for a while after the fucking bourgeois democratic revolution that failed in Russia, it was like the fucking Wild West, dude. It really was. I mean, and it really was that way in America in like 1905. You know what I mean? Like it was still that way. But no, I mean, Joseph Stalin in that time, in the early 1900s, was a fucking outlaw, like fucking Josie Wales, man. The dude was fucking badass. He was taking shit over and and organizing workers and doing what he could to revolutionize the working class. And when his comrade Lenin got sent away, he was put in charge, and he did a phenomenal job, and he held things together until the time was right to put it to the fucking bourgeoisie, and he did.
Agreed. And the fact that he was such a counter, ideologically to Nazism and the National Socialist Party and fascism, the fact that he was counter to all that and created all that he created in the USSR, that he literally has a bad name here in the United States is just it's unfathomable. It's
Well,
Stockholm syndrome. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
So-
there's that, but I mean, that's kind of going away, I think. I mean, even for people that I don't even think, I mean, even for people that aren't even Marxists, I mean, there's a certain point. I mean, we've had the internet for so long, right? And I mean,
they should be able to find up this information, but the thing is they're not willing to play, devil's advocate.
right,
They've been sold on the Cold War propaganda and, was put out and all this individualism that, they don't see that you're actually more individually free as a class under communism
Right.
than you are under capitalist
Right. Well, that's just
individualism.
it. I mean, we don't think that. I mean, we're Marxist Leninists. We don't think that that freedom means being able to acquire as much fucking property as possible and being able to fucking acquire as much stuff as you can and exploiting people. No, we as Marxist Leninists believe that freedom really is not being able to have to worry about whether you're going to be hungry, whether you're going to have a place to live, whether you're going to have a place to work. These are things that make people free when they don't.
It's about security.
When you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from. When you
Not
don't
just security, but emancipation. You know what I mean?
And
It's emancipating.
Shout out to Comrade Mike, who got laid off in this past week. We all feel for him and hope he sorts everything out. But we're thinking about him and we're hoping for him. And I mean, when we hear that, and it's disgusting to hear. I got fired. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck is that even about, man? Like,
Yeah.
like, you're not free. You're not free. If you can lose your job, if you can lose your home, that's what we do.
The capitalist system relies on a pool of unemployed so that they can, negotiate with us. And that's, the bottom line, that eventually you got to be like, there's no negotiation on this.
Right.
And that's when, it becomes a liberation struggle. And that's, not a national liberation, but a class liberation.
A class liberation, exactly right. You fucking nailed that. But my question, though, Steve, is how, like, is there a way to easily guide your fellow union worker into that ideal? Like how do we get our coworker to understand that we need to smash the bourgeoisie?
Well, I think you have to draw parallels between, their struggle, their personal struggle, what's going on, and the fact that they're not alone. And, once they can comprehend that, they're struggling not because they're struggling because the capitalists have so much power over us that it goes back to the fact that there's no negotiating with them,
Right, I hear you. So, like, my whole thing is how, like, in America, like, and that's like, and people have asked in other sorts of forums and other sorts of discussion groups, like, how do you talk about Marxism? And like, well, like, how do you, like, or where is it even relevant? Let's ask ourselves that. Well, your friends and your coworkers, at least in my opinion.
It is, but I think, initially it's one of those things that you have to ease into.
Right.
First you can't come out with all this proletariat and bourgeoisie and communism and Stalin right off the rip. You just can't.
You throw it you change it from work, you change it to working class, to the ruling class, and to
it starts by pointing at your boss and say, why is he cutting our hours back? Why is he taking away our health care? Why is he doing this? Because of profits. You know what? Why does he need to profit so much when we take care of him so much? Well, it goes back to capitalism and
Right.
greed, you know, and you keep the conversation rolling and gradually build up to the fact that, hey, this is a working class struggle, man, and you're right in it, and we got to band together and fucking, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying, and it's something that I've tried to articulate with people I work with for some time, because I mean, like it's difficult.
And it's hard, man. I mean,
It's
my
difficult
best
being
friend at work, he's a liberal. I mean, to the core, and just, you know, he wants these worker rights, and he's pro union, but he just doesn't see the exploitation in the free market. And you know, part of that is his
like,
own privilege.
right? Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, what the fuck if you weren't in a union, guy? Like, how would you feel then? Like, you know, like.
Exactly.
Like,
You know,
some of these liberals are so fucking hypocritical, man. It's like, wow, like, how did you get that way? Like, but
Well, I think that's one thing capitalism does really good is alienate, you know, people, like everybody, for example.
yeah, it does, but what Comrade Bronco has outlined is the fact that, you know, if you're in a union, it's, I mean, if you're already in a union, I mean, the foundation is already somewhat set for a class consciousness, and what you need to do from there, in order to emancipate the rest of the working class, which is ultimately what we the communists want to do. We want to free ourselves from all forms of oppression, and we struggle with all oppressed peoples of all around the world. And in doing so, but you know, in many instances, you know, in many cases, I've called the United States the richest third world country, because in many cases they don't have a lot of the things that the developed world, whether it's in Europe or even in Asia, has. I mean, we don't, like, in Europe, you know, people wonder why workers at McDonald's make 20 something bucks an hour. It's because they automatically, by default, work for a union that negotiates their wages and their working conditions and everything else. And that's not something that a lot of people understand. They just think that, oh, well, it's just great there in Denmark. Well, no, they have a union that they're working for. Like, it's because of a union that they make that much. I mean, no doubt it's because of the government too, in a certain respect, but the people that work at McDonald's and make 20 bucks an hour are doing so because they're a member of a union. And you know, that's different than what we have here.
and if it's not, it's because they've already undergone, you know, a proletarian revolution to some degree, to where that class conscious is there, and you know, their organs of government to be able to, you know, mobilize the masses in different ways. Unions, though, are definitely a central part of that. I mean, if you look around all the events going on in the world, you know, whether we're talking about France or Venezuela,
Right.
you know, different places. I mean, those mobilizations are being undertaken by union workers right now, which goes to
Right.
show the revolutionary potential within the unions. And you know, it's just going to come down to the point in America where, you know, as rank and file union members have just got to give a big old fuck you to the, labor bureaucracy. I mean,
Right.
they're the labor lieutenants of capital, over here.
Right.
And dude, the international president of my union makes a salary on par with the president of the United States. I mean,
Jesus.
it's insane, and I'm a local I'm president of my hall. I make $40 a month. I'm elected, every 3 years. We have elections. That gives me, because I have to work, because I obviously can't live off $40 a month.
Right. Well, the fact that you're a leader for your hall makes me happy anyway. Like, at least the people there have
I
good
mean,
direction, right?
it's got, and there's a lot of guys in my hall. That I live in an area that's it's pretty rural, outside of the city, and in the city we have a lot of poor urban folk, and
Right.
on the outside we have this, a lot of working class. Not that there aren't a lot of upper class bourgeois Z communities, but they're mostly working class, farmers and different things. But they all have this petite bourgeoisie mentality of, this individualism, this freedom that they get, and they don't care who they walk on. And so, when I talk to these people out of my hall, being bricklayers, we work in urban areas, but we usually come from the suburbs and the farm towns and all that,
Right.
to go work in the cities. And, it's, you got to use a class analysis on everything.
I agree.
They don't want to hear about, the gay rights. And even though I'm pro, gay rights and all that, it's not that I'm
Right.
not. It's just the
Right.
fact that as a movement that's got to collect, a big percentage of the masses,
It's not a
you got,
uniting feature. Right.
it's not. And so, you got to use a class analysis and break down to these guys why they're being exploited the way they are.
And
And
yeah,
it's
I gotcha.
a battle, brother.
Oh,
But no, that's awesome, man. I mean, I mean, that's basically why I wanted to have you on here and help explain the differences in what we face as workers, not only in the United States. I mean, this is an international problem as well. Maybe on a smaller level, on a bigger level in some places, depending on where you're at. But this is the root, and it's as I stated, the labor unions are a backbone of revolution. And I'll read what Comrade Lazowski says, that it is impossible to accomplish a social revolution outside of the unions or against their will. Lenin has also said that the Bolshevist revolution could not have lasted 2 weeks without the aid of unions. In Hungary, it was the yellow socialist leaders of the trade unions, Weltner, Garami, and their aides that brought about the downfall of the communist regime. The weakness of the Hungarian Soviet Republic consisted in the fact that the labor unions, which in Russia formed the backbone of the proletarian dictatorship, in Hungary, they were hostile to it and refused to give their utmost support to the communists. To reverse the Hungarian experience is to be found the fact that the Kapp-Lutwitz coup d'etat in Germany last year in 1919 was defeated in no time by the united power of the German labor unions, who, like one, struck a death blow to the monarchist insurrection. It can safely be stated that had the Spartacists in Germany had a predominant influence in labor movement, Germany would be a Soviet republic by now. This points out the way for action in the American labor movement. Stress should be laid on revolutionary work in the unions that group the mass of the industrial proletariat. We have the unions not only during the period of actual combat with the capitalists, with their governments, but even after the dictatorship shall have been established. The function of unions, of organs of disciplined and efficient production and distribution must be broadened, and much of the task of the communist reconstruction and responsibility for running of the industrial apparatus given into the unions. The lesson from the Russian Revolution, which is so aptly put by Comrade Lazovsky, is that the unions, being the natural grouping of the workers as producers, which develop class consciousness, and militancy of the workers, develop at the same time their sense of responsibility and discipline, preparing them for the difficult task of organizing production and exchange in a communist society. So that's all I'm going to give you. But that's some pretty...
Yeah, that's heavy, man.
I think that's pretty heavy. I mean, I love it. I mean, I haven't actually completed all of it.
Yeah, make sure you post a link up if you're reading that off the club. I'd definitely like to take a look at it.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely I'll throw a link up in the description for sure.
You know, I think that points out, you know, what we're doing wrong here in America is, you know, succumbing to our labor leaders and our liberal politicians, and we're not, you know, you don't see any wildcat strikes anymore. You know, we're not using our labor power to our benefit, and it's because it's all tied up in legalities.
Right.
You know, that these politicians set.
Right. I mean, to me, a labor union should be run by a worker, not by a politician.
Absolutely.
I mean, what the fuck kind of shit is this, dude? I mean, I can't even fathom that, dude. Like,
politically, labor unions in America right now, we're screwed. We really are. But fortunately, I mean, we have some silver lining. You know, currently my international is lobbying for you know, silicosis, silica standards, you know, to have dust masks and stuff, you know, and not just my trade, but in, you know, mining and millwork and all different kinds of faucets. There's you know, silicosis is a huge deal that's killing a lot of workers. And, you know, I am proud of him that he's, you know, bringing this working class struggle forward and trying to lobby for it. You know, that's the benefit, is they know they got to be political. It's just, that's where it falls off, you know. And,
I mean, so there's a certain level where you go from, I mean, I'm thinking from the point of a labor leader. I mean, there's a certain point where you go from helping your workers to being a direct enemy of the bourgeoisie. You're either like you because, like, in that same respect, you know, a union barters for the means of production, but any kind of labor leader that's in that same position, and my idea would sort of kind of teeter on helping the bourgeoisie or helping either the people. I mean, they're kind of fucking, they're kind of like a people floating around and fucking, you know, giving a hand job to everyone. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, is that just me, or is that just what?
No, that's true. They're. I mean, the simplest way to put it is they're liberals, and by liberals, I mean that they
burn comrades.
give out, petty reforms uh, that contradict, working class values. And
Right.
man, it's, as I said earlier, it's an uphill battle. It's something that's got to be battled from within the rank and file. The rank and file really need to reach out more to the communities and get more
Right.
communal support. And, you know, even though there's a lot of things that I don't like about the IWW, that's the Industrial Workers of the World. They have a lot of anarcho tendencies that are liberal that I don't like, and they dabble in identity politics. But the one thing that I really do like about them that makes them the only revolutionary union left is the fact that they don't conform to these politics. They don't, they reach out more to their communities and do some of the things I said.
Right.
And they're built up from the workers themselves. They're, as unions, they're more of a democracy. But there's good and bad things about them. There's a lot of good IWW founders like Daniel De Leon. Was a terrific organizer. Eugene Debs, even for his faults of dabbling in electoral politics, he was,
Right.
look at the context of which he was in when, at that time in this country.
I mean, as workers, you could trust them to be on your side. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what's important.
Absolutely, 100%.
I mean, and today, the problem you have is, you don't really have people that you can trust to be on your side.
No.
That's
outside of local unions, we basically have, 3 tiers. We have a local union that I'm part of. We have a regional union apparatus around that, and then the international. So it's in bureaucratic form.
right.
And me as a local organizer, I have a lot more to say on the local level that directly affect my guys and this and that. But international is, and even the district is just out of touch with our politics.
Sure. Out of curiosity, do you have anybody that like you've sort of converted or like put the bug in their ear, or like just for my own humor?
I would say in my local, I have the best success with our apprentices, which goes to show you that the youth is the future and
right.
and can make a difference. Outside of that, thanks to social media and different technologies, I've been able to reach out to other locals in other states, to their members. I'd say there's 5 to 10 that I've gotten more radical.
Good, man. That's awesome.
And that's a very, every strike is good, and I wish I could do a lot more, and a lot of it just depends on the individual and their level of exploitation. I have a lot more luck.
And a lot of it is open-mindedness too. I mean, you got to have
It
somewhat of
is.
an open mind, or you kind of have to understand where you're at and understand.
I mean, the good thing is, being a local officer makes me a delegate to the international convention.
Right.
And
That's really awesome.
so, I went to an international convention a couple years back. I believe we hold them every 3 or 4 years. But anyways, I was able to talk to a lot of guys that were just hardcore Democrats and got them to go a little bit
You show up with
understand
a
that.
hammer and sickle.
I mean, I'll tell you what, dude. I mean,
I'm
everybody,
ready.
they're so scared because, especially we would have a lot more luck if I could convince, our district council. But the thing is they're so locked in with liberal and local Democrats and everything. And because they're so worried about their jobs because they're not elected, the district council is all elected by the international. And
Right, I got you.
and even so I'm the local president, but I got one guy ahead of me who's the business agent.
Right.
And the business agent, I'm elected, but he's hired by the district council.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and he's the only one in our local that's getting a union organizer salary, and his job is solely dependent on the district council. And just like the district council is solely dependent on the international. And, as a delegate, I'm one vote, I'm one voice, and I just try to reach out to as many as I can wherever I am, through social media, through these meetings that we have,
Right.
and push working class issues and point out the contradictions that's in liberalism. That's
that we face every day.
I mean,
Mhm.
the way you break it down is conservatism is taking 2 steps back, and liberalism is going 1 step forward and 2 steps back.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
I got
And
you.
so just can't. We gotta focus more on our communities, I think.
I completely agree. I completely agree.
Got the support of not just our local members, but their families and their friends and the communities that we live in. We can have a greater impact. And I preach this militancy, but like I said earlier, it's kind of a snowball thing.
Right.
You can't jump out there with grab your gun, brother. We're going to revolution.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a little more than that. It takes a little more preparation, takes a little more planning, takes a little more,
Organizing.
a little more of everything. Right.
It does, and that's what made people like Mary Mother Jones, such great, leaders. Is these quotes that they have: organize, educate. You know what I mean? And that's really what's it about. What's it about? We gotta
Right.
educate the working class. We gotta organize them into uh, a union of class, and
Right.
we've got to agitate the bureaucrats and the capitalist class and their politicians.
Right. And that starts with just even talking about it just starts with talking about class struggle at work, even in many cases.
Right.
at least for me. Um, and there's a few examples I have of friends of mine that I work with that weren't Marxists, but now they are. And those friends I met at work.
And in real life, I know more people that are Marxists that don't know it themselves.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, and I'll have
You know what I mean? And that's why it's
Yeah.
hard to bring up Marx, bring up Lenin, bring up Stalin. You kind of, first you got to draw the lines between their own struggle and the commonality that they have within the working class.
right.
Where you say,
I don't go on to. I was gonna say it's funny you say that because I speak to people at my workplace every day, and they talk like they're Marxists because they understand that they're gonna exploit it, but they don't know it themselves. It's just it's funny.
yeah, I mean they got them liberal shackles on them, brother.
Yeah,
And
they're heavy.
that's a bit they think that they can vote their way into emancipation, and that's just not how history shows us it works.
Yeah, and I deal with that. Oh
Nope,
my
never.
God! And we've dealt with it, running around trying to save liberals in various groups. Both of you know that. We've tried to help other people, and other people aren't as receptive. And we take time, we break down historical and material information, and
But it
that
just rolls off their shoulders. They don't care.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because Oedipal, it's so strong. It's like
And that's why
that's the main thing they focus on.
the groups I'm in. I mean, at least on Left Book anyway, where we all kind of hang out on social media. I mean, I don't allow it in my group because it doesn't really have a place. It doesn't really have a place at all because it's neoliberalism, and it only serves to circumvent.
See, I think it's more important to attack those liberals head on because supposedly they already have a Marxist understanding. When
Well, they
opposed,
don't really though.
well, they don't. They're misinterpreting, obviously.
Right.
But as opposed to talking with, people that you work with and meet out on the street, uh, it's a lot easier to talk to those people. They don't know.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree with
mean,
that.
that's partly why it's so easy for me, and like why I've expressed to other people that why like it's so easy to, talk to conservatives that you
Oh
work
yeah,
with. You know what I mean? Like, believe it or not, every conservative isn't a racist. They're not.
oh,
No,
absolutely.
yeah,
Believe it or not, everybody that voted for Trump isn't a racist. I know black people and gay people that voted for Trump. They're not racist. Trust me.
Right. Well, I mean,
like,
I mean, the main focus is we got to point out that individualism,
right,
within the ID poll community. They need to realize that they're going for, rights that undermine, the working class as a whole.
right,
And you can point to affirmative action as an example. I
right,
mean, it may help a few, black guys, that live in urban areas that don't have a lot of money to be able to gain access to education or a job. But ultimately, they're displacing another worker who's more qualified or put in the hard work to get there. And
right.
that
And
that
it creates
person
a
is going to
false,
carry
and it
a chip
creates a
on his
false sort of, yeah, it creates like a false sort of, it, it, it
and I'm
creates
not saying
environment
that.
for racism to fester because ultimately you're creating an hierarchy, and you're creating a system that 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 elevates one over the other, and it perpetuates a constant,
I mean, they do that on purpose.
you know.
You know what I mean? To divide us. The
Right.
liberals do. And some know it and some don't. But the bottom line is, I am 100 for black liberation and LGBTQ liberation. The thing is they're going to find that liberation when we all get that liberation.
Exactly. I mean, and it's going to come from. I mean, and they're going to help us. I mean, and that's
If
and
they
that's
find
what it
that
is.
the
You know?
state gives them a certain amount of liberation that separates them from the rest of the working class, then they're going to have the working class against them. And that's why, a lot of people voted for Trump, because Obama brought up a lot of, identity politic, and
Yeah.
not just Obama, but a lot of the liberal movements that have gone on. You have
Yeah. I mean, you had all kinds of shit.
and I'm not trying to make a broad generalization.
I mean,
on
it was just in the
Black
news,
Lives
dude.
Matter
It was just in the
activists.
news. Fucking Mike Perez, dude, got fucking booed off the stage. He's like, I guess Mike Perez is like the face of the DNC now, and he literally got fucking like annihilated off the stage from being booed. Like it was epic, dude. You'll probably see it on the internet or on Facebook,
You
whatever.
said he's
Like,
the new head of the DNC.
yeah, Mike Perez, he's head of the DNC, dude. He got
Who
fucking booed off the stage. Like,
Yeah.
who was booing him?
the crowd. I mean, the crowd was
Oh,
booing,
just
and
the people.
well, yeah, no one likes him, and then he he snapped, and he's like, "Fuck you, fuck!" Like he swore at the crowd. So, like, I'm
Damn.
kind of curious to see that, actually, just out of curiosity, because he looks like fucking. He looks like an old Billy Crystal with fucking like some librarian shades on.
That's
You
bald.
Like I don't know how else to describe him, but
I mean, he was our former uh he served on the National Labor shit. The NLRB,
right,
you know what I mean? He served on there, and he was one that helped push our silica standards or whatever. But the thing is these people make such minor gains for the working class. It's like you're either for the working class or you're not. These
right,
guys say they're for the working class, but they want to maintain their corporate profits. You know what I mean? And then you have the conservatives that are only concerned with the corporate profits.
right. They don't even pretend to
And
care.
and so it's like, are you going to go for the wolf, or are you going to go for the wolf in sheep's clothing?
Right.
You know what I mean? There's no choice. Marx said, every few years, the working class has the opportunity to vote for whoever's going to oppress them.
Right.
And I'm paraphrasing. That's not,
No, I remember.
it was a little
I
different, but that's basically what it is. You just vote for who's going to oppress you.
Yeah, and
And if you're going to vote for who's going to oppress you a little less, then buddy, you ain't got no balls.
right.
No,
I'm with you. That's essentially why we're here. But I realize we've been here for a little while now. We've kind of been rambling on, and time's been flying by, as it often does. But Steve, I'm guessing you probably got to head home by now, right, brother?
Yes, brother. I got to attend to my family here.
I hear you.
Today on Sunday, and it's like 7 days a week. I get to see my family for, 3-4 hours a day, and
right. I got you, brother.
how can a working class man raise his family and be involved, politically? He can't, and it all goes down to capitalism and why we're exploited.
Exactly.
That's why I'm thankful for your time, dude. I really am, and I appreciate any future time. But this is a really important discussion, and it's possibly one of many episodes about unions and labor movements that I'll do. it may not be next week. You know, it may be a continuing thing. It may be something that I bring up again in the future is part of an addition to what we've done here. But it's something that we keep at the forefront of our Marxism in general. And it's something that we're going to keep at the forefront of what we put out week in and week out, because that's what we are. We're workers and we're Marxists, and we want to be free. And so we got to discuss on how to get there, you know.
Well, absolutely, brother. And I appreciate your invite on the podcast. And anytime,
Hey,
just let me know.
I thank you. Stephen, you as well, man. Thank you for coming back on, dude.
Yeah, man, that was not a problem. I enjoyed it.
Definitely.
Was much more informed now on unions.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I learned a lot. That's why I brought Comrade Steve on, so we could all learn together, and I could learn as well. So, but thank you both for joining me, and thank you everybody for listening. And will join me next week. Join all of us next week. So later, and you all have a good one.
You too, man.